Let's try it now. Good morning. Okay, how many of you guys have kids at home? Let's see a show of hands. How many people have kids? Then you know what I'm trying to do right now. Okay, one, two, three, eyes on me. Thank you. Thank you. Very good. Welcome to day 2 of Bloom. I'm Eric Farrow, the CEO of Trellis. Um, I'm incredibly grateful to Pete May and Joel McCower, who are the co-founders of GreenBiz 16 years ago, of welcoming me into this great company. Okay, I may have to do this one more time. One, two, three, eyes on me. Okay, thank you. Thank you. I know this is a passionate group that likes to talk to each other, and we've structured this conference to really largely have that, but we do have moments when we, want to get the attention of the group. So, um, we all know that the earth is at an inflection point. The sustainability professionals also, the industry is at an inflection point. And where I would say my first 12 years, it was characterized by a couple hundred companies and a handful of people at those companies. It's moving to now where there's thousands of companies and hundreds of people within those companies that are confronting the climate crisis. And as Teresa mentioned yesterday, this is my first show where we're formally called Trellis Group. And what I want to say about that is GreenBiz has been at the forefront of this industry for a long time. Actually, Joel McCower launched the GreenBiz business newsletter 33 years ago, and it actually had to be delivered by the mail. So it's a long time. And John Davies launched our network for sustainability professionals 16 years ago when there were only a handful of people that had the title of CSO. And at the time, there was nobody else to tell them how to do the job, so the network really needed to exist. And our goal in this next phase is continue to lead and to really help drive the agenda and transform the areas that we know need to be transformed. Our mission stays the same, empowering professional communities to confront the climate crisis. And how we do that is something we call this flywheel effect. So we have 3 service areas that are opportunities for you to learn, connect, and engage. And so events, this is one example, very visceral example. You're here in Colombia at COP, at Bloom, and the way we think about events are about nurturing an ecosystem to drive transformation. And the next area is really what I already mentioned, the network that we launched 14 years ago. And back to the point, back then there was nobody in a company who could tell you how to do the job because it was the first time the job existed. And today that's different. And our network is really evolving to meet the new needs, which is really about much bigger teams and individual roles. So where we used to have one company, one member, we now have one company, as many members as you'd like to have. And we have a vertical communities like the Nature Group, which Alex runs, or a Europe Strategy Group, which Teresa runs. And then we have things like communications, circularity, finance. And it's really a great opportunity for companies. And so my invitation to you is, if you're not already a member, join the 165 companies that have been really leading in this space for years. And I think you will get tremendous value out of it. And then to go back to where we started, we've recently relaunched our briefing under Trellis Briefing, and it's an amazing thing that you should read every day. It's a great place. It's not really focused on the latest, greatest news. It's really about what your peers are doing, where successes are happening and where challenges are happening. You can scan the QR code if you are not a subscriber. And then finally, I'm going to end on a personal note. This is Seal Cove Pond on Mount Desert Island in Maine. And I've had the great pleasure for the last 25 years going here with my family. My mother-in-law owns a beautiful cabin there. And yes, it did weigh into me getting married to my wife. It is a really extraordinary spot. But this last September, something really magical happened. Every morning when we went out for our paddle on that glassy pond, this year we had a bald eagle join us on our little paddle. And the bald eagle is just one of the great success stories in conservation. And being here this week and being at COP and being here at Bloom and interacting with so many of you and just seeing the amount of passion and energy and corporate commitment going into this space, I actually feel confident that we will find more success stories like the bald eagle. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Teresa to get you through the rest of the day. Thank you very much.
All right. And with that, we're ready to start today's program, which will be really focused on looking at how companies and financial institutions can contribute to landscape conservation and restoration at scale. And I'm really pleased to kick off the conversation with um, three thought leaders, leaders of practice in this space. Patricia Zurita, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Conservation International, Mark Wishney, who is the Chief Sustainability Officer at VTT Timberland Investment Group, and Melanie Nakagawa, Chief Sustainability Officer at Microsoft. Welcome, everyone. Thank you. Um, all right, and welcome back, everyone in the audience. So, to kick off today's conversation, we will look at a partnership that Conservation International and BTG have been leading and that Microsoft has been closely involved in as well. That is really a great example of how different organizations from different sectors, different stakeholders can be working together to do unconventional things at a big scale. Because what we really do need is larger scale investments into nature, into landscapes, into ecosystems. And so I'm really excited to be diving into the lessons that you've learned um, in designing this strategy and doing the work, and giving the audience inspiration for how they can do similar things. So what you've been trying to do or doing is invest $1 billion, quite a large sum of money, into protecting natural forests in Latin America. Tell us a little bit about how that came to be, and what exactly that means. Patricia, can you get started?
Sure. First of all, thank you so much for having me. Um, for those of you who are not familiar with Conservation International, we are a global conservation organization that was created in the 1980s specifically to protect and restore nature for the benefit of people. So we have been always looking into how can we make sure that we're protecting this incredibly important biodiversity that is actually something that we depend on. Our health, our wealth, everything that we do depends on nature. Now, when you think about the evolution of the conservation movement, we've always been trying to protect what is left, but we also realized very soon that we needed to start restoring what has been left or what has been destroyed, and what has been converted. And traditionally, the conservation community has been trying to create this restoration movement out of philanthropy money, um, looking into compositions of native species that will recreate the natural ecosystems that were there before. Unfortunately, there's a huge need for restoration and not enough philanthropic money to make it happen. Restoration is expensive, particularly when you cannot count with natural ecosystems that are there that can enable natural regeneration to happen. So we've been spinning our wheels for quite some time trying to get restoration happened. And in 2021, in partnership with BTG, we decided to jump into a completely different model, one that would actually bring in private capital, make restoration commercially viable, but also would, and very importantly for us, ensure that we are getting that nature and that biodiversity back into these ecosystems. And that's how the partnership with BTG started in 2021. See, I would become an advisor to BTG. BTG will raise the $1 billion for restoring this incredibly important ecosystem in the Cerrado in Brazil specifically, and ensure that we are, building up a coherent strategy that brings nature back at the same time that we can actually have an economic and financial return on commercial timber. So it's a very different model. And from those of you from the conservation community may realize that this is a little bit of a shift, and a change of chip. for us. We've always been very, very, how can I say, almost religious about making sure that we have restoration of full 100% native species. But to make it, to reach the scale that we need at this time, to reach the speed that the planet needs at this time, we have to start thinking about new models. And this model with BTG enables us to bring, as I said before, private capital and restore at scale, combining this commercial timber with very important native forest so we can restore these ecosystems and make it commercially viable and ensure that we can really roll it out at a massive scale in multiple places. So with the idea of BTG in 2021, we also started another process with Apple and Goldman Sachs. It's called the Restore Fund, and that is in Paraguay, also in the Cerrado and in the Atlantic Forest, looking into how can we expand and replicate these experiences. So it's been a phenomenal ride. We're not there yet. We're still working on it, and we're still pushing it into other ecosystems, particularly in the Amazon. But it has been a phenomenal experience so far.
Amazing. And congratulations on that successful mindset and practice shift. Mark, it's quite a large sum of money. What did it take to mobilize that capital?
Um, well, excuse me. First, let me just say thank you also for the invitation to be here. And it's a pleasure to be here with these incredible partners on stage. And briefly, for those that don't know BTG Pactual, BTG Pactual is the largest independent investment bank in Latin America. It's based in Brazil. And the Timberland Investment Group, where I sit, is one of the largest institutional timberland investment managers globally. So we have a long history and track record of managing commercial investments in forestry, always with a very high degree of sustainability, but focused on I think you could say traditional commercial models. But there's an important number as we think about the speed and scale that Patricia was mentioning, and the need to mobilize capital that's greater than what's available just from philanthropy or governments. There are $57 trillion of investment portfolios that have been committed to net zero globally. And increasingly, those same investors are beginning to seek nature positive outcomes from those investments, or from those portfolios, from those commitments. But that capital is not moving. Investors are seeking opportunities, but it's difficult to place capital in climate and nature positive investments. And so we began our conversations with Conservation International thinking, can we meet these investors where they are? Can we start with a model that investors understand, that they're comfortable with, and then can we begin to modify that model, and modify that model so that we can deliver significant additional, well beyond business as usual, positive benefits for climate, for biodiversity, and for communities. And so that led us to together develop this idea of a 50-50 split in a portfolio, a balance between protection and restoration of native forests and commercial tree farms, well managed in the right places, with all the appropriate safeguards. But by doing that, our thinking was that we could get to scale much more quickly. And we began, operating on the ground just at the beginning of last year, and already we have executed what, to our knowledge, is the largest restoration project to date in the Brazilian Cerrado, which is an incredibly important and threatened ecosystem. We've lost 50% of the Cerrado. What remains is really a fragmented patchwork on private lands, and this already is beginning to make a difference. We have a lot more to do, a lot more scale to achieve, a lot more work to be done, but I think it's already showing promise.
And then Melanie, to get to Microsoft's role, it's a new project. It's not uncontroversial in some sense to channel private money into these landscapes, into communities. There could be negative outcomes as well. Like, how did you make the case for Microsoft to be an early supporter and get involved? What's the business case?
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us all here. And I think this is such a really exciting discussion to have, especially to kind of highlight what does partnership look like at scale to really meet the urgency that that the moment requires from all of us. And so for a company like Microsoft, for us, it really was grounded in our initial commitment that we made back in 2020 to be a carbon negative, water positive, and zero waste business that protects ecosystems in particular, and to do this all by 2030. And that bold commitment, both around carbon and water and ecosystems, really led to early conversations with both of these organizations to think about, how do we get there, what would it take. And for our carbon negative commitment, it requires actually a real focus not only on reductions first in our strategy and our operations, but also in removals, and thinking about how do corporations begin to create and accelerate a market for high durability, high integrity, nature-based removal systems that are out there. And this is really what brought us to an early conversation with both of these partners. They have a long track record in both the scientific integrity, community-based engagement, but also in being able to generate, real impact in those areas that are investable opportunities. And so for that, to be carbon negative, we also had the water replenishment component too, around our water positive goal. So we brought all these together, and for us, it wasn't about de-risking per se. It was about finding those opportunities that'll help reach the scale that we need as a business to actually meet these commitments we've set to be carbon negative and water positive by 2030. And this opportunity with BTG to partner with them with the support of CI allows us to start to showcase, what does that good look like? What does scalable investments by the private sector that generate both people impacts, community impacts, and positive change in a nature-based way was a great opportunity for us to join in.
Yeah. And are you buying carbon credits associated to the project, or what is?
So we're looking at both the carbon benefits from the projects that are here, and looking at the role that technology offers in support of showing what a scalable measurement, reporting, and verification look like as well.
Great. And so I'd like to dive a little bit deeper into the risks that you were seeing in this project, and like what you did to get ahead of them and mitigate them in the project design and implementation phase. Patricia, you said that this has been a little bit of a shift from what Conservation International has been doing before. What were you worried about going into it?
Well, there's a big bad wolf in the restoration world when you talk about eucalyptus or monocultures in general. And this is precisely where the conservation community, not only CI, I have to say, the conservation community has shifted also. I mean, it was, maybe we were the first ones, and CI is very much of a risk-taking type of organization. But I think it's slowly going into that space where we can see the value of restoring at scale, where we can combine commercial tree farms with native forests. And I think that was the first, I would say, reputational risk for us, is just thinking about CI is actually supporting or endorsing monocultures. And what I want you all to leave with is, we're not. What we are supporting is this landscape approach that has 50% commercial timber, so we can actually bring the capital at scale with 50% native that wouldn't have otherwise happened because there's not enough philanthropic money out there. So I would say first reputational. Second, I mean, is thinking of this is a new model, right? I mean, we are trying new things. So there is a risk of, are we actually doing the right thing? We know that we are because of our science. We think that is going to definitely pay off. And the next risk is actually bringing it to the places where may not be as commercially viable, but is absolutely needed. So the arc of the Amazon, how do we bring this model to ensure that we're reducing the pressure on the Amazon and that we're really restoring a lot of those lands that have been degraded because of a succession of agriculture that becomes non-productive to cattle ranching that is non-productive and then gets abandoned? How do we make sure that we start recreating the ecosystem benefits that the Amazon has with this model in an arc that is truly helping us reduce the pressure and avoid the tipping point? And I would say the last one is, making sure that the market actually is responding. And that, because we can have a wonderful partnership between the two of us, but if the market is not responding, then the capital is never going to flow. So really looking into how can we put our shoulder on the mix. And let investors and off-takers know that we have our credibility on the table, that we have put our science on the table, that we realize that this is an important new model, and that we're willing to bet on it.
Yeah. Melanie, I'm curious, what advice would you have for other people in your roles at other companies in terms of having the courage to engage in these projects? Because I think right now there's also a lot of hesitancy in the sustainability space of doing things that are a little bit more um, unconventional, because a lot of companies are worried about backlash, about regulatory risks, and so forth.
So
What do
this
you
is
tell your peers?
what I loved was in the opening conversation, the opening speaker talked about the growing role of of CSOs or chief sustainability officers in more and more companies. And I'm proud that there is a growing number of CSOs showing up in more and more companies across the world. They're global, and our roles are often very different, and they're wide ranging. But the thing that's common to all of our roles is what are we doing for our businesses that are going to ensure a path to be a more sustainable company that provides business value. And so one of the things I've been sharing with a lot of my peers is we all have reduction first strategies, and that's obviously first and foremost a high priority. But we all saw what the IPCC said, over the last several years, which is we're going to need an accelerated removals market, a real meaningful, removals market that is based in science. And so where do companies show and step up to showcase that there is a demand, there's long-term offtake for a removals market that we know is going to be needed, that science requires by 2050. And so we are proud to be one of the largest companies in the removals market that's there today, but we don't want to be alone. And we need to make sure we bring others along with us. So to have meaningful partnerships like this one that have a strong measurement and verification and reportability to what they're doing. Just earlier, he was showing me, visuals from his satellite imagery and LiDAR technology that can actually show the trees that are growing and that are being regenerated and adding value into these areas. And to be able to have that type of visible proof, to be able to have policymakers and standards bodies realize that there is the opportunity to digitally and locally verify what's happening, I think is really important. That hopefully will de-risk and get more and more companies saying that, there are high quality removals out there. Microsoft has published, I think now at this point, 3 white papers that go into great detail of what types of projects we're investing in for carbon removal, the types of engagements we're having, the lessons we've learned so far 4 years into this journey of being a buyer in the carbon removal market, and particularly in nature-based solutions. And we're also expanding that to now provide through our Climate Innovation Fund investments into companies that are doing LiDAR detection, soil-based measurement, and other technology solutions that are out there. So really it's sharing our lessons with our peers of what it takes to be part of this market, but also what an incredible opportunity it is for companies to be moving on the track to meeting their commitments through both a reductions and a removals approach to their strategy, so that companies can be part of the journey of helping governments and countries reach their Paris commitments as well.
Great. And so my last question is about how are you ensuring, so we've talked about benefits for ecosystems, for water, for carbon removals, but in the end, it's really also about the people on the ground and the people in the communities. So I'm curious, how are you ensuring that this capital is trickling down to the communities on the ground, indigenous peoples in the Cerrado, and making sure that they are engaged and that they benefit from this work as well? Mark, can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I mean, I think that's a key consideration, because in the conversation about natural climate solutions, we talk about speed and scale all the time. We talk about the need to mobilize large amounts of capital rapidly, and we need to think about imagining that we're successful at doing that at the scale that we intend. That implies billions, potentially trillions of dollars flowing rapidly into rural landscapes, largely in the global south around the world, but places where massive inflows of capital do not always generate all positive outcomes. They do not necessarily provide benefit sharing. That does not necessarily lead to inclusive development. So for us, that's another key element of the partnership with Conservation International, working with us and relying in part on CI's long experience, long track record working in these places, their relationships with the right community organizations on the ground, their credibility, to ensure that we can co-develop our community engagement program. So we have really robust and really uh, detailed understandings that we develop of the landscapes in which we invest before we invest together, to understand the context into which we're investing, to understand if there are ways that that rapid investment of this kind might destabilize local communities or might have unintended consequences. And then we work directly with communities and with our partners at CI to develop long-term engagement programs, because another element of this work is these are very long-term commitments to these landscapes. We're thinking about 15, 20-year plus engagements. And so really we need to be neighbors, partners, parts of these communities. And one of the fundamental truths of working and investing in rural places is that if you don't have support, positive support and engagement from local communities, you will not be successful over the long term. And so that's fundamental to the design of our partnership and to the work that we do.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing this incredible work and for sharing it with the Bloom community here. If you have more questions, Mark is leading a lunch roundtable later, right? So go ask your questions directly. And please join me in thanking our panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right. And with that, we are moving on to our next conversation, which will kind of dive a little bit deeper into some of the topics that we've touched on right now, and looking at another tool, another strategy to really channel global corporate money from nature strategies to local communities on the ground, to make sure that we actually see biodiversity benefits and benefits for communities. So I'm really excited to welcome now Joel McCower, co-founder of Trellis Group, to the stage, who will be in conversation with Patita Nangumu from Earth Acre and Alexandra Holmlund from Marlborough Biodiversity. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you, Teresa. While we're getting settled, can we have a round of appreciation for the two people who brought us together, a whole crew, but really two people who brought us together and made all this magic happen, Teresa Lieb and Alex Navarro. We have a very short time to talk about a very big topic, so let's get into it. Biodiversity credits. Patita, let's start with you. What's the elevator pitch for the biodiversity credits at Earth Acre?
We produce products that are directly ensuring benefits to communities with transparency, and ensuring that we have proper reporting on the biodiversity uplift.
Okay, that's a great elevator pitch. We've only made it to a couple of floors. Let's have a longer ride. What are those products? How do they work?
When you're developing these nature assets, the one thing that we always have to have at the back of our minds is that these communities are actually the stewards of nature. They're the owners of these resources. But by and large, in countries in East Africa, these communities do not benefit from this nature. They co-host the nature, they co-manage the nature assets, wildlife and all that, but they do not benefit from it. The benefit goes to the government and to the investors. So these communities are beginning in their own way. The activities that they do are driving biodiversity loss. Reason being, they want to support their livelihoods. So unless and until these benefits go directly to them to serve their needs and to speak to the challenges that are causing them to destroy nature, this will continue to happen. So for Earth Acre, our primary and key aspect is to ensure that these benefits have to get to that person who is actually stewarding nature, taking care of that nature, and for them to actually know that their work is appreciated and they're recognized for it.
Great. Well, we'll come back to that. But Alexandra, let's hear your pitch.
My pitch would be that biodiversity credits are a tool that corporations can use to engage in nature positive outcomes. They can connect corporate value chains, particular biodiversity areas that their businesses influence.
So let's talk about the corporate piece of this and how what each of you does plays into what companies need to be doing in terms of looking at their biodiversity footprint and how it enables them to reduce that or to offset that in a way or however you describe it. You mentioned companies first, Alexandra. Talk a little bit about how do you work with companies?
Well, it's early days, yes, I should say. But what we try to do is to understand, since we work in forestry-based projects at SHRED, so anything that is made out of trees, that could be paper, diapers, I don't know, wood in furniture, etc., in construction material, all these products have been growing as trees. So any business that uses those products or is selling them has a reason to think about forest biodiversity. And by assessing the corporate footprint connected to those products, the footprint can actually be translated into a hectare footprint and therefore translated into a positive biodiversity outcome in terms of a credit per hectare.
So my company makes widgets of some sort, and I have an impact in my supply chain and in my operations, perhaps the facilities. How do we measure it? How do you know how to offset that, or to what companies need to be able to do to make sure that they're contributing to their part of nature positive, nature restoration?
Well, the first thing would be to do the footprinting assessment. And there are experts who are better than me at both explaining and actually doing it. But really, what it is about is understanding the amount, really, of damage that a production or a business is really creating on a particular ecosystem.
And what is the state of the art of those measurements? Is it something we can really accurately track at this point, or is it still a little bit of a guesstimate?
I would say it's not perfect, but we certainly know relatively well what the footprints are. And we know how to describe them relatively well. And we actually don't need to be that exact to start acting now.
Batita, the businesses you're working with are small businesses, land smallholders, but also they are at the beginnings of larger supply chains. So how do you interact with them, and how does that roll up to some of the companies in this room, or how can it roll up to some of these companies?
In the process of developing these projects, there are various processes, and we end up with a product that we call a PDD, or as recommended by the Vera Nature Framework, which is the project design document. And in it, it has got details, for example, of land tenure system, who are the owners of these lands, who are the custodians of these resources, what is the governance structure like for those communities. And this is most cases to ensure that we are avoiding elite capture. And the other thing is the benefit sharing model. Different companies have different ways in which they do it, but for Earthacre, the benefit sharing model is pretty equitable in the sense that we give 70% of the earnings to the landowners and the communities, because they have got to see this as a financially feasible option. And for them to not till their land, for them not to lease their land, for them not to use their land for mining, they've got to get an income that will allow them, that will make them choose not to destroy, not to convert their land to something that will be incompatible to conservation and to their land use as well. So I think, in summary, the PDD, which would be what an investor, what you would ask from this particular investor, would be that PDD where you get to see the details of the project, how it has been developed, what the process and what are the social guardrails, the free, prior and informed consent, who are the stakeholders involved in the project, how long has it been, what is the government's role in it, and all that is stipulated in the document that allows you to see how much the community has been included in decision making.
as we look at carbon credits, we see how complex and challenging that's been. Things like additionality and double counting and permanence and so on. And with biodiversity, we're not just talking about one thing, tons of carbon. We're talking about nature. So what are some of the verification and methods, or how do you make sure that what you're talking about actually happens and happens not just for the short term, but over the longer term? Alexandra, start with you.
Sure. So actually, we do have a lot of knowledge about biodiversity credits, which sometimes are called credits, sometimes are called something else. There exists tons of scientific literature on the topic of payments for ecosystem services that has existed for a very long time. So we actually know what works and what doesn't. We have also a lot of lessons learned from what has not worked very well from carbon markets. And there are several organizations actually present here today that have provided good guidelines, such as guidelines from the Biodiversity Credit Alliance. There are several papers written on the integrity of biodiversity credits, for example. And that includes the usual things such as additionality, permanence, leakage, that sort of thing. Yeah.
But Tita, how do you ensure that what you say is happening and what the landowners say is happening actually happens over the long term?
Let me speak to what I would say sovereignty of data for these indigenous communities. At Earth Acre, we look at harnessing that indigenous knowledge with technology to ensure that that information is kept with the community and also with Earth Acre. I'd say that the point we are at is that this information does exist among communities. It's just that they do not record it in the way that we do. But with using their knowledge and information that they had over time and recording it, it means that as we develop this product, they can see their knowledge in it, they can see their story in it. And so that becomes that it is not only what we know and what we have found them doing, but rather product that shows a contribution of the community and what we also have managed to do using technology, being acoustics, remote sensing, and all that.
I imagine that doing this also enables you and all of us to capture and retain some of that indigenous knowledge, uh, while before some of it is, as we know well, is disappearing. Is that part of what these credits involve?
Yes, it does, because the definition of their culture, their heritage, who they are, where they are now, and where they want to be, things are changing. And for them also, as generations come, because this knowledge of taking care of nature has been passed on to them over time, and things are changing, yes. And minus that knowledge and minus that practice that they do, those practices that they do, things will be different in future. And hoping that whatever is happening now within those communities is captured by them and those working with them like Earth Acre, so that it remains within their history, within their heritage, and within their story.
Alexandra, for a company here that is interested but has not yet dipped their corporate toe in the water yet on biodiversity credits, what do you advise them to do? How do you start?
Well, the general recommendation would be to start with assessing the current status, and to work with a corporate biodiversity strategy. Another general recommendation would be applying the mitigation hierarchy as a precondition to any other ambitions towards nature positive.
Well, I guess part of my question is also who do you turn to? Obviously, your two organizations are likely candidates, but what a company, who do you call? What do you do? How do you start? What are the organizations that can help uh, basically get them ready for the work that you do?
Well, we have been engaged at Colbo, both in the Biodiversity Credit Alliance and also in Sweden, in a similar organization, to create a practical application, really, of the global recommendations set by Biodiversity Credit Alliance and how that might work in practice. So today we have actually a standard for biodiversity credit, a global standard that is based in Sweden, and that provides this framework for how we can work with biodiversity credits. And we focus actually on production landscapes as our niche. which is a direct connection to corporate value chains. It makes it much easier for corporations to relate to what they're affecting to what we're actually hoping to provide in terms of biodiversity credits.
Petita, tell us a short story of something that's going on the project that you've been involved with involving a company that would help some of our audience, some of our viewers understand what this looks like in real life.
In some of these areas or regions that we work with, the form of livelihood is pastoralism or livestock keeping, with some areas also having some form of tourism. So there is a form of another layer of revenue, but there is the unexplored nature asset or unexplored other revenue flow, which would be biodiversity and carbon credits. In this particular case for today, we'll talk about biodiversity credits. So you're looking at working with a community or looking at your ESG report, what TNFD is requesting or asking you to do as a company, and you're thinking about what is it that I can do in my own way to ensure that I support some form of biodiversity uplift. What that would look like is that you would be getting a report from a certain region showing that if you were to purchase certain, say you're buying, say 100 credits, what will that look like? That will look like you're going to benefit, say about 3 to 4 households, depending on how much land these community landowners own, or let's just say 50 households. And for these 50 households, what this is going to look like is that they're going to get direct cash transfers. This means that they're going to get money just the same way you get a salary at the end of the month. And this means that it is going to sort their direct basic needs that they have as families. And with these direct needs, what are you going to be doing? We will be tracking the social economic impact of these families as they receive these funds. What do we do for the nature biodiversity uplift? You get a report of this certain area of how much species have been identified, have been observed over a period of time. What is the state like? And for example, also get a report of what would be the human-wildlife conflict or human-wildlife coexistence interaction reports look like, which go, of course, a long way with the government reports as well. And the last one would be what we would call fence removal. In order to support biodiversity uplift, we've got to put down fences that are blocking wildlife movement or species movement. And so those reports is what then go into your buying of credit as a report that you get to show what has been the impact for both wildlife, for communities living in this particular landscape.
So down to the last minute or so. So when we meet back here at COP17, what's the story each of you hopes to be able to tell about biodiversity credits and how far we've progressed? Alexandra, start with you.
Well, I believe that we will see more use cases for biodiversity credits, again, in connection with corporate value chains and a more broader adoption of this way of thinking. I hope to see more corporates directing financing to indigenous communities or communities with buying of nature credits, hoping that we will be able to give reports of stakeholders or families that will have received direct cash transfers transparently, and also see reports of the socioeconomic impact of what these funds have been able to do at community level.
Wow, lots to think about and exciting area to develop. And we wish we had more time to talk about more things, but we are out of time. We've got more great sessions to come. Thank you so much for the work that you do and for helping show the way and pioneering these biodiversity credits. Please join me in thanking Alexandria and Petita.
Thanks so much. I don't need that. Thank you. All right, that was a great conversation, and we will now have a very exciting report launch from our friends at Nature Tech Collective and Nature for Climate, who have been doing a lot of work over the past months to really dive deep into what technologies will help you all advance your nature strategies over the coming years. and are bringing us some examples of how innovative startups are already working with companies to implement those in their businesses. So, welcome to the stage, Lucy Almond and Gilad Gorin.
Hi, everyone. It's really nice to be here this morning. So thank you for having us. So I'm Lucy Almond and I chair the Nature for Climate Coalition. For those of you who don't know, Nature for Climate is a coalition of 28 of the large environmental organizations, many of whom are in the room, and we're housed in the Nature Conservancy. And why we're up here talking about tech, nature tech. I have a bit of a confession to make. I don't think it's a sensible idea to make a confession on a stage in front of hundreds of people, but I'm going to do it. So Mark Wishney said earlier that one of the things is we need to mobilize billions of dollars into natural climate solutions. And when Nature for Climate first started to talk to the financial institutions and the finance sector to mobilize capital, we realized that actually they were getting very excited about this emerging sector, nature tech. And so we felt like we need to understand what the nature tech sector is, help define that sector, and hence we've been doing that work. And then I'll introduce my colleague Gilad, because we've got to know each other pretty well in the last 18 months.
Hey everyone, good morning. My name is Gilad Gorin, and I'm the executive director of the Nature Tech Collective. We're a tiny but mighty nonprofit organization and community whose job is really to accelerate the adoption of nature tech solutions, which we think is the great unlock to closing the nature finance gap. Rather than bore you with all the details of what we do, quick show of hands, who here is a member of the Nature Tech Collective? Ask those folks, they know better than me. So we've had the great pleasure of working with Lucy and Nature for Climate for 18 months now. 12 months ago on stage, thank you, Theresa and Alex, we actually debuted the 2023 edition of the Nature Tech Report. And it was really about defining what is nature tech. It wasn't really a known quantity. So a year's passed. Lucy, what's been going on?
So I think firstly in the last year, we picked up some amazing new partners on the way. So the report that we issued yesterday was done with KPMG, the Climate Collective, the Nature Tech Collective, and also the VC firm Serena, who helped track the numbers of investment going into this sector. But I think mainly what we've learned is the sector's maturing at a rapid pace, and it's now ready to help accelerate the nature positive transition. And this is evidenced by earlier this week, we also released a database of nature tech companies. So there's more than 1,000 companies now in this sector. And you know you're working in the right sector when yesterday 2 reports on nature tech were released at exactly the same time. So alongside ours, there was another report from Salesforce, ERM, and Nature Metrics. So I think we can say it's pretty much ready to go as a sector. And so then, Gilad, it's my turn in this really natural chat show format to ask you a question. So you live and breathe nature tech every day. What are your reflections in the last year?
So there's this kind of framework, a mental framework of like, it's called why, what, how, okay? Or another way to look at it, it's awareness to education towards action. And I think over the past year, what we've seen and what the report will show is that we're past the awareness stage. So now we're at this area where we could either fall down to the education gap and just keep learning, and just not act on it, or we could start to get up towards the action. And we're at this stage right now, and it's the trough of education, as we call it. I think we're here at a position, and this report will show the taxonomy that's in it that gives you literally the solutions for the challenges, that nature tech is here. Nature tech is ready to be in service of your individual specific nature tech or nature challenges. So it's really about action, and we're really stoked that this report's out to show it. And with that note, just so you trust me, you don't think I'm just like blowing smoke, we have 2 amazing case studies, live case studies from the over 30 case studies we have in our report. Who do we have?
So first of all, we're going to be delighted to welcome up on stage. These are nature tech double acts, basically. So we're going to hear from AXA and Landlife, and then Pivotal and OG. So first of all, we're welcoming to the stage AXA and Landlife.
Good morning, Bloom. My name is Axel Ducos, and I work for Landlife, a nature restoration company.
Hello, everyone. Marie Gruder from AXA. Really happy to be here. AXA.
Yes, and let me take you for a few minutes only away from beautiful, mega diverse Colombia to take you to another beautiful, mega diverse country. And hopefully the slides will work with me. Indonesia. More precisely, let me take you to Renang in the island of Borneo with its unique heath forest ecosystem, which is also the home of the iconic species, the orangutan. Now, that ecosystem has been under tremendous pressure for decades due to overlogging, primarily for timber, so selective logging, which creates wildfires. The ecosystem is severely degraded, so much so that the land will not, within our lifetime and on its own, regenerate to the healthy ecosystem that it once was. And this is where we intervene with the support of AXA to bring together a high integrity reforestation project. High integrity means using diverse, native only tree species as part of the planting. And this can only be done in collaboration with the local community, the Dayak, who work very closely with us. And here you see some of the nurseries that we co-created together and that the community manages. Now, what's exciting about this reforestation project is that in it, we are really pioneering biodiversity baselining for both on the degraded land, but also on a benchmark forest, similar forest that is close by, so that we really have a good sense of where we are, what is the gap between the degraded land and what a healthy ecosystem it should be. Now, to do that, we use a number of new advanced tech. We're using bioacoustics, we're using satellite imagery, and we are using remote sensing. These technologies hold great promise because they can scale. And that is fantastic because, of course, we want to have impact at scale. But before you can really scale up and use this technology on a very large landscape, you need first to adapt them to that ecosystem. You need to enrich them with the local knowledge, and you need to ground truth them. And this is exactly what we're doing in this project. So to use the example of bioacoustics in terms of adapting it, bioacoustics, for those of you who may not be familiar, you basically put recorders on trees, you leave them for a couple of weeks, you record everything, and then the algorithm will pick out all of the animal noises and assign them, identify them to right species. Now, of course, when we start from a degraded land, there are no trees. So the first adaptation that we had to make was to create, with our bioacoustics partner, to create basically a spike protocol so that we could truly compare the data from the degraded land to the benchmark forest. The second thing is that while the technology is good, it's not yet perfect. And it is not able yet to capture or recognize all of the animal noise, nor to assign them to the right species. And this is where we work again with the local community, local experts, and also local academics to bring that knowledge and to help to train the tool so that it can be deployed later. And in terms of the ground truthing, we use all the well-established, maybe lower tech, but proven methods like field surveys. And what's exciting is that when you bring all of these technologies together, we get to a very robust set of biodiversity indicators that capture the key biodiversity dimensions relevant for this ecosystem. Which means that when we come back in 2 years to measure, we can have confidence in the data that we're seeing, and we can truly evaluate the impact of the high integrity reforestation on biodiversity. We think this is key. We think this will help to bring confidence and unlock more capital going into nature restoration. Now, we know that a lot of companies are more and more understanding their reliance on nature and are investing in their value chain, which is fantastic. But I think the case we're trying to make here as well is that it is important to also restore beyond the value chain, right? And that value chain, really nature for nature mitigation is important because it drives ecosystem resilience and it basically helps protect the asset that you have in your value chain by lowering the risk. Now, of course, in doing all of that, also protecting the habitat and recovering habitat of the orangutan. Up to you, Marika.
Thank you, Axel. So yes, nature and biodiversity is definitely a key focus of ours at AXA. And as Axel has just highlighted, we're expanding the work now on a topic that both LandLife and AXA hold dear, ecosystem protection and restoration. I'm not going to give you details about what AXA does. I'd like to highlight, however, that beyond investing and also factoring nature in our underwriting activities, we believe that it's essential to look at the full range of opportunities to actually make a difference on this topic. And actually, this is what we're doing with LandLife. So I could go on about the ways in which this actually fits into our strategy, but I'll just give you a few. So I'd say that this partnership is interesting for us because it's supporting the development of the needed expertise and technology, as Axel has highlighted, and also recognizing that we can't do it alone. So we need to partner up, and we have a range of partners just on this one initiative. I would say also that in terms of impact, we're looking at ecosystems as a whole, and so we're not just focusing on planting trees. We're also looking at restoring the land before planting. And that, I think that's not exactly what most people do. So I wanted to highlight that. And then maybe last point, I've actually been to Borneo. So in the Indonesian, not in the Indonesian part, but the Malaysian part. And what's interesting is I did learn why deforestation is taking place. And it's very simple. You have people on the ground who are just looking for a means to have a revenue and to subsist. And so that's why the community engagement of this initiative is very important as well, because it's a means to sustain what is effectively going on the ground and to actually serve what we consider to be a shared future. So I invite you very much to reach out to Excel in particular to learn more. And thank you very much for being here.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I'm Yuya Toyoshima from Oji Holdings.
And I'm Cameron Freding from Pivotal.
So from here, we will talk about our partnership between Oji and Pivotal. So let me start with Oji's journey. We are a Japanese company engaged in pulp, paper, and packaging. And we are 150 years old company. And actually, our story begins with this picture. This mill is our first paper mill built in Tokyo 150 years ago. And at that time, raw material was just waste clothes. So sustainability and circularity has always been our key word since the beginning. And since then, we have been expanding our business to wood-based pulp and paper. And in 1937, we built a forestry company to secure wood material. And since then, we have been expanding our forests, and we have currently 400,000 hectares in the world. And also, we expanded our business to paper-based packaging side, whose recycle rate is really high. So we are 150 years old. So what challenge will we take from now? We are aiming to achieve both carbon neutral and nature positive in the era of natural capital accounting. we can see growing discussion globally how to evaluate, quantify the natural capital to connect to economic value. So we decided to start forest value visualization project in Sarufutsu area in Hokkaido, Japan. You can see the picture here. This is beautiful landscape, including forests, marshland, and a pond and a river close to the sea. The forest is a boreal forest, actually southern limit of the boreal forest. And also the soil is peatland, holding huge amount of carbon. And also marsh is said to provide nutrients such as iron, which is particularly important to the fishery industry in the coast. So we decided to start the pilot project here and the biodiversity side. As you can imagine, we made partnership with Pivotal and jumped in the Sarufutsu forest.
Let me just test this out. So when we first began discussions with OG, it's like this sound as well. The task was, how can we create a way of tracking change over time of nature and biodiversity? Yes, on the Sarufutsu site, but potentially expanding to their entire supply chain. And if you imagine a company as large as OG, 650,000 hectares of forest all throughout Southeast Asia, but also in South America, you need a way of doing this which is going to be scalable, which is going to be affordable. It has to have very high integrity, and it also has to be auditable. And how do you do all these things in a way that you could do it year after year, where the results are going to be meaningful, where the ability to actually track change over time has been thought through well in advance, in the way that you actually stratify the data collection. So what we first did was we took satellite data, and then we did a habitat categorization map. So what are the habitats? And then we checked that with OG, who of course have been there on site for a very long time. And then with that, you know the basic structure of the habitats there, and then you can create a random stratified sampling plan. And then with that, you know where you might actually place the sensors on the ground, different sensors for different places. This is something you could do anywhere in the world. Then what you need is to go on site and actually collect. So we've built a field app that allows not just Pivotal, but anyone. So for example, OG staff to go on ground and collect data in the right place at the right time for the right amount of time, and to evidence that it was done. And then at the end, when you collected all this data, it's a lot of data, firstly, you're going to need data pipelines. You're going to need to use machine learning, but you also need a lot of human experts that can help quality control the results, help identify species from photographs and from audio, in order to actually build the machine learning models that help you process this volume of data. And so the very first thing we do actually is find people who can identify species groups. So the birds, the bats, the frogs, the plants, all of these things that we are collecting data on. And you need to find them. You then need to test them. About 70% of the people that we test actually fail, even if they have a PhD in the subject. Maybe they're not good at identifying frogs from audio. But some are superhuman. We now have a network of about 250 people from all around the world who are expert in different regions, and they can help us. So once they pass these tests, we then contract them and we pay them for annotations. And that means that we can go anywhere in the world from scratch and start producing very, very high quality data. And the cost of acquiring that data decreases over time. Higher quality, more accuracy, reduced cost. So anyway, so we've now done all of this, and actually we've now processed all the data with OG, and the very first results are in. We have, I think it's a very rich set of data that includes birds and bats and frogs and trees and plants. We found lots of bears. We found a very, very threatened species, the red-crowned crane, iconic species for Japan. It's actually on the 1,000 yen bill. Yeah. We also found some invasive species. So there's lots of things that you can take from this, and the results are in a format which Oji, who has vast network of partners who they supply for packaging all around the world, brands that you have guaranteed heard of, could look at these results and understand the actual impact of some of the forestry on these sites. And in the end, not only do you get this very rich set of data that you can share with local communities, share with your partners, but you could also move towards evidencing nature positive. So you, of course, have habitat classification maps. You have species distribution maps. For every single species that we found, you can look at where they were actually located and have evidence behind every single bit of it, because it's all digital data collection and it's all being quality controlled. It's all in a database. You can calculate from that primary data any number of different metrics. There are thousands of metrics that you can calculate. Some are ridiculous, but some make a lot of sense, and you could produce the results from any one of those. And then ultimately, you have a set of data, auditable, shareable, foldable, scalable, that you could roll out across an entire supply chain. And I guess something that you should really take away from this is that even at supply chain scale, this is now possible. And Oji has been amazing in actually piloting this in Sarafutsu, beautiful place. And, now it's something they can share with the world.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, no more banter. Really quick. Gratitude. Thank you to Teresa and to Alex, of course. Next slide. QR code. Is that gonna work?
Sorry, there's not that.
All right. Well, we're just gonna keep going. We have an amazing report that was debuted yesterday. 30 case studies, including pivotals, emojis, and many more. Full-on solutions taxonomy framework. So any company or any financial firm, any NGO could go, I need to solve for challenge X in using tools Y in geography Z, and you'll get your framework that explains who does what. So here's our Oprah Winfrey moment. Everyone gets a report. Just pull out your phone. You get a report. You get a report. You all get reports. Thank you to Jen Stebbing, to Melissa Generali, who wrote this. Thank you so much to my amazing team as well, to Lucy and the Nature for Climate team. As we said, Serena, Climate Collective, KPMG, who did amazing work, and so many people here who helped us make this report happen. And of course, thank you to Trellis Network. You guys are amazing. Cheers.
All right. Amazing work. And I hope you all find the report insightful. Okay. Next up, it's time for our thank yous. Big thank you again to all of our sponsors who are supporting Bloom this year, and especially to our headline sponsor, Deloitte. A big thank you also to all of our community partners who have been hosting breakfast and workshops and receptions. And tonight we're going to have an after party with Nature Tech Collective and Nature for Climate. So please join us there as well. We're here for the fun too, not just the conversations. So, yeah, moving on to our next conversation, I think one important piece to realize about this work is that it's not just about channeling new investments into new projects, but also looking at the capital flows that are supporting negative environmental outcomes. And there has been a lot of work around subsidy reform, and a lot more work needs to be done in that space. And so I'm excited to have our panelists for our next conversation who will be diving deep into what needs to happen to move from negative capital flows to positive capital flows, specifically when it comes to oceans. So welcome to the stage, Kate Lamp, who is a freshwater strategist at UNEP-FI, and Rashid Sumaila, professor at University of British Columbia. So pleased to have you both here.
Thank you, Teresa. Good morning, Bloomies. Is everybody still awake out there? Good. And have you packed your snorkels? Maybe not. Okay, next time, make sure you do. This is it's going to be a rip-roaring 10 minutes throughout the blue economy. As you know, the oceans contributes roughly $2.5 trillion to the global economy every year. If it was a country, that would make it the seventh largest economy in the world. It sequesters up to 30% of human made CO2 emissions, and around 3 billion people rely on the ocean for their livelihoods. So it goes without saying that we must do all we can, obviously, to protect this essential resource. And doing that so is one of our most important endeavors that we have as human beings. And so I'm delighted to introduce you to Dr. Rashid Sumaili. Rashid is a leading ocean and fisheries economics expert. His work has been instrumental in shaping our understanding of sustainable ocean policies around the world. And as Teresa mentioned, one particular area that Rashid has been specializing in over the last 20 years at least is subsidy reform, particularly with regards to fisheries. Now, today, total fisheries subsidies are substantial. They're totaling around $36.4 billion every year, with around 22 billion of that estimated to be driving unsustainable practices within our ocean economy. And Rashid is going to tell you now why that is important and what's happening in that space. So over to you, Rashid.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kate. It's a pleasure to opportunity. I just look at this room and it's amazing, right? These are powerful people who can really make the world better, right? You have the power, right? So it's a privilege to get to share ideas with you. The ocean is crucial, as you know. Because we live on land, most of us think more about land, right? About what we do, like now. But the ocean is 70% of the surface of the earth, and it's large, and actually it's a lot of business. Like Kate said, we have the blue economy. People talk about that. Ocean economy, lots of things happen in the ocean. Think about transportation, shipping alone, right? And you have tourism, you have the fish. Each year we take about 100 million tons of fish out of the global ocean. If you really want to understand how large this is, you convert it to mature cows. And when you do that, you assume a mature cow is 1 ton on average. That means we're pulling out of the ocean 100 million fish cows, I call them, right? Yeah, just think about that. That is a lot. I mean, and it's a lot of dollars also. I mean, on average, if you take the average price of fish, some are very expensive, some are cheap. About $2,500 at the dock. So this vessel, right? You just multiply it out. So that is some change. And then you have to look at the value chain throughout, how it goes. So in one estimate, we estimated about $500 billion from fish alone each year, right? If you think about the economic impact. So that's a lot of economic activity and jobs. 260 million people depend on it. So I'm giving you these numbers just to set the stage that this is important. In 2016, I got the chance of talking right after President Obama at the State Department. And I told them, you all remember, some of you remember how gray he became 2 years in the White House. You remember? It was in the news. And I told them, if not for the fish jobs, he would have been grayer. Because the craziness that will come from all these countries, large developing countries, will land on your table, right? So it's important we think that it's global.
Absolutely.
And we need to sustain this. So.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rashid. And so can you reflect on the role that subsidies play in enabling sustainable outcomes to be achieved, or perhaps or disabling those outcomes to be achieved?
Yeah. So subsidies are public resources, right? Public access. Wild fish is also a public resource. It's a public access. Now, we don't want to misuse either of them. You don't want to use public funds to destroy the fish, right? And the resource we depend on. So subsidies, that's why I've spent over 20 years looking at this. We built a big database, came up with the estimate, Kate said, about 36 roughly $1 billion a year. And that goes to fund fishing. And the gross revenue of that fishing is about 100, 120 billion, 150 billion. So that's a lot of change. And that leads to overfishing. Fuel subsidies are a particular one. And the WTO has been given the mandate by the world to try to remove the harmful subsidies, 22 billion of them. And this is ongoing. There was actually the first time ever we got an agreement and that was in June 2022. And business is actually supported. I gave a talk to the business arm of APEC, the Asia Pacific Economic Council, and CBAS. Some of you may be members of CBAS, the Stockholm run thing where you have the big fishing companies working together with scientists to try to ensure we have what I call infinity fish. Okay, maybe you haven't heard about infinity fish. It's the idea that if we manage our fisheries well, they can continue to support us nutritionally and food wise, job wise, and money wise forever. And anything that can do that to you, if you sum the benefit to infinity mathematically, the total is infinity benefit. Therefore, infinity fish. That's the title of my book. Check it out. You'll love it. so infinity fish. That is the goal here, to keep this going so businesses can thrive into the long run.
And it is trademarked already, right? Infinity fish. So it's great that we are seeing progress. Clearly, I think you said yesterday it took 20 years to get to that agreement.
Yeah.
And so, is it enough?
Yes, most of the scientists, it's not enough. Why? Because they shied away from specifically saying we want to remove fuel subsidies, all the harmful subsidies. They had general agreements on, okay, you don't subsidize a stock that is already overfished. You don't subsidize illegal fishing, or you don't subsidize fishing where there's no management. These are good. It's a good start, but it's not enough. Even the WTO agrees it's not enough, and they're working now to try to improve this. And this is where you can help push countries here and there. In our own interest, businesses, we want this to continue. And you really have some power, I believe strongly, to be able to help us ensure we get infinity fish.
Thank you, Rashid. Now, the next thorny issue we're going to dive into, and all puns are welcome. If you've got new ocean-related puns that Rashid has never heard of before, then we can buy you a drink tonight. The next thorny issue is, of course, deep sea mining. Often viewed as a solution for securing essential minerals for green technology, as many of you will be aware. However, we are aware that there are many, many risks associated with this particular advancement. Would you mind sharing with the audience a little bit about what some of those risks are?
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Deep sea mining, is mining which takes place very deep down in the ocean, 2,000 feet or meters down, right? That's really, and that part of the ocean is very delicate. The animals there are very special. They live very long. They grow very slowly. They are very economic. They are more economic than your financial officers here to be able to survive, because there's little light, there's little food. So you have to have that in mind. Some of them live for more than 100 years. The Icelandic shark lives for 400 years. And what I tell people is anything that can live as long as your grandma and your granddad, better leave them alone. Leave them alone. They've earned their freedom, right? So that's it. That's the kind of creatures in there. So going there to mine is really risky from the science we have done. And we don't have the scientific knowledge to really do this in a way that is sustainable. That is why many companies, big companies, have said they don't want to use minerals from there for now. Governments have said that, many of them, because we want to at least understand more about life there and what it means before we go in there. So there are risks. There are economic risks, because it's very complicated to really go down there. There are legal lists which businesses should know about, because the UN agreement actually says that before you do anything that deep, you have to ensure that you have to almost guarantee that you wouldn't harm life in the ocean, biodiversity. And that is difficult to guarantee. And somebody may take you to court or something. So there is that. There are so many other issues here. Maybe you want to follow up.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I was wondering whether you believe any of these risks can actually be mitigated.
Oh my God. In general, I'm an economist, so in general, I don't believe in saying things cannot be mitigated. I mean, if we have enough information and the knowledge, we can do anything, frankly speaking. So I'm willing to allow that. Having said that, this is a really difficult place to understand. People say we understand the moon more than we do the thing happening there, right? So it's going to be really difficult to do. And maybe what businesses, influential people like you can do is to say, what can we do otherwise? There is a lot of innovation going on, other kinds of ways to meet the need for transition, energy transition. I've read about some of them. I've talked with engineers who say, frankly speaking, we don't need those minerals in order to transition. We have enough on land and we know how to do terrestrial farming. There is also the idea of circular economy. I'm sure many of you really love this. I mean, how about we find ways to use what we have as best as possible, effectively, efficiently, recycle. And you can actually make money by helping the world to find a way to do this. You remember, if you use $1 here, that you cannot use it there, right? So if you run into deep sea mining, which may be just a promise, it might actually be a pipe dream, right? I don't know that for sure. You rather do the things we are more used to and turn them around. Let us be more secular so that we can have a world that we can all live in and our children and grandchildren can also live in. Remember, this is not just about us, it's also about them.
Thank you, Rashid. And so, what type of policies do you think we will need to have implemented in order to both protect ocean health whilst also continuing to boost economies? There are many, many countries that are perceiving this as a vital lifeline for economic growth at the moment, correct?
Yes, yes. And I think we need to be clever with public funds. We need to be clever in what sense am I talking? We need to find ways to help businesses, individuals, civil society to be able to save what I say. We save two birds with one stone. You take actions where you see that I didn't say kill two birds with one stone. It's typical. You save two. And how do you do that? If we have public funds and you use it to innovate, to help businesses to innovate, you can support. I talk about good subsidies too. In fact, I have an op-ed which will come out in the National Observer of the newspaper in Canada, where I'm saying that it's so difficult, even in Canada today, to use taxes to deal with climate change. So I'm saying, how about we think about using subsidies in clever ways to help individuals and businesses to help us reduce CO2 emission in Canada? So you can do that. So find a way to help businesses and individuals to reduce their footprint and to do circular economy, come up with new clever ways of meeting our needs without harming our environment to the extent that we kill it. I tell people you can have a dead ocean. You know that if we really keep taking and putting waste, plastic and all that in, we can end up, according to one study, by 2050 with more plastic in the ocean than fish. Just think about that, right? I mean, that's a dead ocean, right? And we don't want that. And to avoid that, we need to be really very clever with our public resources and our talents in this room. When I came in and I saw you guys, I say, hey, at the end of this, you are going to start solving all our problems. The ocean wants them more, right? Seriously. Yeah.
Right. We're going to hold you to that, of course, as well. I've already asked the Bloom team to make sure we keep your names on file. And let's not forget, of course, with regards to plastic pollution in particular, that we've got an incredibly unique moment coming up in the next couple of months where the INC negotiation process is going to reach a critical limit in which national governments will either strike out and start to take action on plastic. And I think that's another strong area that you all can lean in and begin to demonstrate your support for strong movements by national governments on that particular front. So last question before we have to leave the stage and let everybody get their lunch. You're an incredibly optimistic character. It's been such a joy getting to know you, Rashid, over the last couple of days. I feel very boosted having spent some time with you. Tell us what your long-term vision is for ocean health and policy frameworks, and if there's one particular or two particular wishes that you have about policy reform in this area that we can keep an eye open for, what would they be?
Yeah, so people say, "How do I keep optimistic?" I say, "How not? What do you do without that, right? You think we should just stop because there are problems? No, that's when you double your efforts, right? We have to keep going. And the things that actually motivate me, one is history, right? If you look back in history, actually, we the people, some of us have pushed us to do the right thing. It's not easy. I can start naming things. If I really want to be brutal, if I want to be brutal, I'll tell you, instead of sitting here talking with you, I'll be picking cotton, right? And people said, this is not right, right? If you think about gender equality, now we are here, boys and girls, women and men, bringing our brains to bear on problems. Some people fought for this, still fighting for it, actually. So that's where the hope comes from. And also, finally, on hope, there's one person that actually I'm scared to lose hope because of him, Nelson Mandela, right? I'm just thinking if Nelson Mandela in his grave looks up and sees me giving up, what will he say? Rashid, what the hell have you seen? So that is this all this come together. And in terms of policy, we talked about the circular economy. We talk about clever use of subsidies, right? And I also really try to get the support of businesses because businesses are powerful, right? I mean, without businesses, what can we do, right? The governments do their thing, but businesses are important in driving change and action. So, any policy that will support and push people to be innovative and clever within what we call the planetary boundaries, right? There is a group in Stockholm. They look at the limits we are pushing. How can we stay within this and still thrive? So those are the kind of policies I will look for.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Please join me in giving a round of applause for Dr. Rashid. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you so much, Rashid. Such a pleasure. Thank you. And thank you, Kate. All right. Well, Rashid is not only an award-winning academic, I think maybe we need to have a Bloom Prize for the most entertaining speaker. And, and he would definitely win it. So pleased to have had this conversation. So before we head into our last session today, a quick announcement for you all. Can we go back to the last slide, please? Next year's Bloom is going back from Cali to California. We'll be in San Jose from October 28th to October 30th. We would love to have all of you back. And Bloom will be co-located again like last year with our climate tech event Verge. So you have 2 reasons to go there. And we hope to see many of you there. And then one other quick logistical announcement is that there will be lunch in this room over here, and also roundtable lunch discussions outside on the terrace. But please don't go outside on the terrace to grab lunch if you're not planning to attend one of those conversations. All right, with that out of the way, we will head into our last session, which focuses on storytelling. It's such an important topic because, as we've mentioned many times today and yesterday as well, our community is still too small. We talk too much to each other and not enough to other people. So I'm really pleased to have Maria Isabel Torres here with us today, who is the head of Latin America for Mongabe. And Mongabe is, for those of you who might not know, doing a really amazing job telling conservation stories and reaching new and diverse demographics. So we will be learning from their lessons in spreading the word about conservation. Welcome to the stage.
Thank you for the invitation. And I have, for the last 8 years, I have been running Mongabe Latam. Is one of Mongabe's 5 regional offices, which includes Latin America, Africa, Indonesia, India, and Brazil. And we are a news media specializing in environmental issues with a team of 100 people, more than 1,000 journalists around the world. And we have made significant achievement from exposing crimes, environmental crimes, to promoting government and justice actions in favor of indigenous communities in different countries. But in the middle of this coverage, there's a question that haunts me in this world of fake news and news avoidance. That is, how can we continue to communicate effectively about conservation? Let me share a story. Let me share a story about the beginning of Mongabay Latam. We were barely a year old, and we were covering the fires in the Amazon. We have the full coverage, pictures, photograph, on-the-ground information, everything. And at some point, I saw on Mongabay social media some people saying, "Oh, this is terrible. I'm from Mexico. I want to know, how can I help? Oh, this is terrible. This happened every year in my country. I'm from Bolivia. How can we change it?" Difficult question, right? So they weren't trolls or haters. They weren't criticizing our coverage. They were asking us to go beyond the disaster. They were asking us to offer them some opportunities to take action to help the people. So we took this opportunity to reflect on our coverage, to not to change it, but to adapt it. And I want to share with you for insight into how this shift helped us to expand our impact. It is true that many journalists prefer to do in-depth research because rather than positive stories, as if reporting good news is less journalistic. But the fact is that people is tired and overwhelmed of reading only bad news. So we took the decision to have this solution journalism approach to covering these stories. We have several criteria to choose projects. For example, projects that have been working several years, that we can prove the impact, that we can measure the scientific methodology. And for us, these stories can be used to hold the government and the private sector accountable, because if you offer the audience solutions that work, they can demand the authorities to support those projects or to replicate those projects. And if we have these stories that can be used as guide for anyone who want to support or to invest in projects that are having consistent work. So in these years, we have published around 300 positive stories with this journalism approach. And in Mongabay Africa, which is just getting started, they want to use this solution approach as a key driver in the coverage. Why? Because they don't only want to have these stories, they want to change the narrative that in Africa, is there any solution? There's no solution, it's doomed, right? So it's not only about this changing of the approach, but also to changing the narrative. And I want to share with you another example, another lesson from indigenous people in Latin America. This is an investigation we ran in Peru using satellite monitoring tools to show the environmental crimes threatening indigenous communities in 5 regions in Peru. And what we found is that 60% of all indigenous communities in Peru, in these regions, were affected by deforestation, illegal mining, illegal crops, or several of these environmental crimes at once. Terrible. So this map shows us Ucayali, one of these regions. We can see in red the deforestation. We can see in yellow, light blue, and green the indigenous communities and reserves. And this orange plane are illegal airstrips used by drug traffickers in that territory. So surrounded by environmental crimes. But also indigenous communities and leaders have told us that they don't want to be portrayed only as victims, because we know that they are active, they are playing an active role in protecting their forest, even putting their lives on the line. So let's see another map with a different perspective. We have here, again, deforestation in red, coca crops in purple, illegal airstrips, and in the middle, the space with no environmental crimes, that the territory that is well protected is the one of the indigenous communities in gray. And they are acting as a buffer zone for a protected area, indigenous protected area in green. So what we can see here is how they are resisting. So what we choose to do is to show not only the crimes, but also the stories of resistance, the proof that they are doing an excellent job in trying to protect and conserve their territory. So it's a minor change in the narrative, but as important as having heard the indigenous leaders and how they want to be portrayed. Sometimes it's very difficult to work with partners, and we journalists really know about that because we just like to have the exclusive news, right? But if we want to have a regional perspective, we need to work with partners. We need to share the information. So in Mongabay, we have partnered with very well-known news media, mass media outlets in Latin America to prepare regional investigations. So the local partners bring their critical knowledge about the countries. We bring our expertise. We made the collaboration. We publish the same day. We have a communication strategy to have a unique identity, to have a common hashtag, to have more power when we publish. And that have worked because at that time, all the journalists became like spokespeople for that topic in their country. We can do it alone. We have to work with them. The other part about expanding the impact is you have seen that we have doing journalism is expensive, is complex. So my concern is how to reach more people. What have we done? Manga-based content is published under a Creative Commons license. This means that all of our content can be republished by anyone for free. So we took a very proactive strategy. We look for news media, large news media, and we offer them our content. We said we have positive stories, we have investigation, we have comics, we have videos, we have podcasts. What do you need? So we want to think ourselves as a hub of information because we want the people to read that information. And some editors want positive stories. Some of them want only animals, stories about animals. Some of them want investigations. And many people have read manga-based content in those news media. So we have built a strong relationship with this media. We kept in touch with the editors every week so we can respond to their needs. And thanks to that strategy, Mongabay Latam has around 50 republishing and partnerships agreement with news media in all across Latin America. And one of those, many of those media are very influential media in their country. So that had helped us a lot to scale the impact. And finally, let's focus on the diversity of our audience. You know, we have a very specialized audience that reads and like our long, in-depth 3,000 words investigation, but we want to go further, right? We want to that our information can reach more people. So what have we done? To change that, we began to summarize our investigations in post on 5 things you have to know about environmental liabilities, 3 things that you have to know about pollution in the oceans. Short, easy. We summarize the investigation in 1-minute video. We convince our journalists to become our TikTok influencer. We have done comics from out of the stories. In 2 hours, we are going to present a journalistic stand-up in a theater, trying to explain an investigation. So we try everything because the information is very valuable. It has cost us a lot. And I know there is resistance to new formats. There is resistance to go to these new social media platforms. But the truth is that if we are not there, those spaces will be filled by people that do not know as much as the people here know about these topics. and as much as you care about these topics. So we have to go to those places, find a way to go to these places. And almost in the time, finally, the core of what Mongabay does is quality information. That's something we are not going to change. But we have been very open to listening to the audience, to the sources, to the allies, to what can we change, what other tools can we use. And I think that has been key to reach and to expand our impact in the region. So thank you. Gracias.
Okay, my microphone. Okay. Thanks so much to Maria Isabel. I hope some of those strategies are inspiring to you in how you think about your communications and the people that you need to be reaching. All right. So that's it from the main stage here at Bloom, at least for this year. We'll see you back next year in San Jose. And I hope you'll enjoy the rest of the day with interesting discussions, our workshops, and many of the other events on the program. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. Oh my God.